Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Slay with Zay, and I am your trans tutor. So we've been talking about gender for the last few episodes, and guess what? We're going to keep talking about it because this is a Trans 101 series on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or however you're watching it. So it's going to be a series about gender, specifically from the trans perspective. So this particular episode, we're going to be talking about gender expression and gender roles and how they affect not only transgender people, but how they also affect cisgender people as well. It's important to talk about these things because it plays into things like stereotypes and things we expect or anticipate from people upon their birth, upon their conception, upon their very existence. And it's impeding or it harms people to have these expectations because if they don't live up to them, what happens? You'll have to stick around to find out. So let's get into this episode, gender expression and gender roles. Let's go. Now, let's define some of these terms so we can have a better understanding. Let's start with gender just one more time. For the people in the back, gender is a social construct in which a medical professional upon your birth gives you and assigns to you based upon your biological sex. So if you were born male, you are typically going to be assigned to be a boy, and then you're going to grow up to be a man. And then if you're born female, then if you're going to be assigned to be a girl, and then when you grow up to be a woman. And then of course there are intersex people in the middle, which we've discussed at different times. Okay? So the problem with this is that we figured out that everyone's gender is not going to align with their biological sex. And that's what being transgender is. When your biological sex and your gender internally don't synchronize and don't line up, that's what it means to be transgender. The opposite of that is to be cisgender, where you're like, oh, this all does come together for me. This is good. We like this. And so I was born a male, so I'm going to stick with being a boy, with being a man. I was born a female, so I'm going to stick with the idea of being a girl and growing up to being a woman. That's okay. That's cisgender. Transgender is the opposite of that. Okay? But that is something separate from the idea of gender expression. So we know what expressing is. Expressing is to show or to evoke or to tell someone about how you feel about something. So when it pertains to your gender expression, it means how you're going to show up to the world in regards to gender. The way that you present yourself, the way that you carry yourself, the energy, all of that kind of stuff. Okay? Let's dive a little bit deeper into gender expression. Now, on previous episodes, we discussed the gender spectrum, where on one point you have man and masculinity, and on the other point you have woman and femininity. Okay? And in the middle, of course, there is a gray area. Now, as it pertains to gender expression, it is also on a spectrum as well. So let's use some examples of people that we're familiar with, because there are different levels and different variations at which you can present yourself to this world. So, for example, let's take someone like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Big, strong, burly, masculine-looking man, right? So, when he was born, he was assigned to be male at birth, and then his gender was assigned and attached to that. So, he is cisgender because he grew up to be a man, okay? Now, his presentation is very hypermasculine. Hypermasculinity would be tall, muscular, rugged, all of those things. Those are hypermasculine. So he's on this side of the spectrum. He's probably past it for all we know. So that's the idea of hypermasculinity. However, let's talk about someone else who was also assigned male at birth, and the gender is also aligned with it as well for the most part. So, someone like Billy Porter. So, disregarding the fact that he is a queer man, he grew up and identifies with being a man, but his presentation to the world can sometimes vary and sometimes change and can sometimes present very femininely. So, as we can see, gender expression isn't completely connected to your gender identity. It can be, but it's not completely attached to it. Because Billy Porter was also assigned male at birth. He grew up to be a man. And so now his gender expression can sometimes fluctuate and become a little bit more feminine, like wearing dresses or heels or makeup. Those are things that we attribute to femininity and womanhood. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had the same background and characteristics, negating their sexual identities and who they are attracted to. They had the same gender upbringing, and then they expressed their gender differently. That's the point I'm trying to get across. So let's talk about someone else. Let's talk about a woman, okay? As far as women are concerned, they're under the same scrutiny as men are when it comes to their gender expression. So when it comes to hyperfemininity, let's think about someone like Kim Kardashian. Very much born a female, assigned to be a girl at birth, and grew up to be a woman. So when you see her, she has the very bodacious body, hourglass figure, hair always done, makeup, bead, everything. The things we associate with hyperfemininity, similar to how Billy Porter's expression is hyperfeminine as well sometimes too. Okay? However, on the flip side, we have someone like Young M.A. And again, disregarding the fact of her sexual identity, she was assigned female at birth, grew up to be a girl, and then became a woman. But her gender expression is very masculine. So, I just want to make sure that these things are very clear. It doesn't matter how you were born, and you grow up and you get to choose how your gender is going to be and how you're going to express it to the world. So on the masculine side, we have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and we have Young M.A. And then on the feminine side, we have Billy Porter and Kim Kardashian. They're not the only ones who do these kind of gender bending rules. You know, as far as Billy Porter and Young M.A. are concerned, we also have people like Prince. Sometimes he presented very femininely, right? And then we also have women who are like Chyna, the wrestler. She presented very masculine. But my point in all this is that the expression of how you present to the world is solely up to you, as well as your gender itself, solely up to you. You can't change the biological sex, and we are well aware of that. But your gender expression and your gender itself are solely up to you and how you wish to interact with the world. Okay? So that's gender expression, all right? Now, as it pertains to being transgender, we are all indoctrinated into this society, which basically means that when you're born, you can't help the rules that are already here. You have to start following the rules of them upon your birth. You don't get to make the rules, you just fall in line of them. But as you get older and mature and start rationalizing things for yourself, your gender and your gender expression will start coming through. So for transgender people, we also are afflicted with this ideology as well. So basically what that means is when trans people are trying to discover their gender identity, they have to really, really hone in on what it's going to be. For trans women, we get the picture of like a woman needs to be hyper feminine. Kim Kardashian, she needs to have huge boobs, no waist, very, very wide hips, makeup always done, all that kind of stuff. Hyper femininity. And so you obviously get praise for those things. The more that you do those things, the society is going to praise you for those things. When it comes to masculinity, for people who are trans men, who are trans masculine, the more that you present masculine through your transition, because of what you've seen through your life as being indoctrinated by this society, you're going to have to fall in line of being strong and rugged and very fearing, if any kind of way, dominating. So if you don't follow the rules of those things, then it becomes very weird. Cisgender people have to follow these rules as well. But it's even more challenging for people who are transgender because they are not inherently the gender that they wish to be upon their birth. So people who are trans women have to literally fight against the idea of gender and their expression all the way until they get to the feminine side. Okay? And people who are trans masculine have to fight through the feminine all the way to the masculine side. Okay? So, when you are talking about gender expression, transgender people actually have to go through a little bit more because they don't have the natural equipment. Trans women aren't born and going to develop natural busty breasts and no hips and wide hips. Trans masculine women are going to grow a very large beard, and they're not going to have a full set of muscles and biceps and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to be inherently domineering and tall. That's not how genetics work. So they have to fight against these things in order to make sure that their expression matches their gender identity, because in this society it rewards you for it. Okay? Let's go on. So, these things are very serious when it comes to gender stereotypes, because not all women are going to fit into that box of what womanhood is supposed to look like through a male perspective gaze. And on the flip side, when it comes to masculinity, which is policed very heavily, at an early age, if you start to exhibit as a boy child, if you start to exhibit feminine traits, you will be demonized and punished for it a lot sooner. You have to make sure that you follow the rules of masculinity. If not, you'll be very much tortured and hurt by it. So these rules about stereotypes and gender are very damaging, and they don't fit everyone. So the reason we have these gender stereotypes is, that's the point. We don't know why. They're damaging, and we shouldn't have them. We need to alleviate them and relinquish them, as well as the gender roles that they come with. The anticipation that women can only aspire to be nurses or teachers or even secretaries, to men who are going to be doctors and high-level construction workers and CEOs of companies. Why do we have these roles in place without the anticipation of these roles? Why can't women have these higher positions? The patriarchal system. It's damaging. It hurts not just trans people, even though it hurts them significantly more. It hurts cisgender people as well. And it's important for us to keep these things in our mind when we're going through our world. That stereotypes and roles do not help anybody. They only hinder us. So let's go ahead and wrap this little episode on up. Alright, so we're at the end of the episode, so hopefully we have a better understanding of gender roles, expression, and stereotypes, because not only does it affect cisgender people, it also highly affects trans people. And we want to make sure we keep these things in our minds when we are conceiving and thinking about gender and how we express it to the world. Everyone's expression is going to be different. Everyone's gender identity is going to be different. And it's not based upon your biological sex. It's how you as a person wish to interact with your world and how you want the world to interact back with you. Okay? So, gender is something that's fluid and can move, and we have to allow it to do so. If we don't, things are going to become very challenging and even more damaging than what they already are. Okay? So, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. On the next few episodes, we're going to get even deeper and deeper and deeper and learn more terminology. If you love this web series and you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, give it a like and go follow the page. And if you're on Instagram, double tap. Twitter, please follow us at Slay with Zay. Use the hashtag Slay with Zay as well in order for us to keep everything in one beautiful little area, okay? And don't forget to share so that the content can spread and we can raise more awareness around trans identities, especially for people who may not understand everything. We want to get the awareness out there, okay? So again, thank you so much for joining me on another lovely episode of Slay with Zay. Bye!